easy to find and costing this country nearly 100 million rands a day. We're going to be kickstarting the second hour of the show with a very, very important topic: the illicit cigarette market here in South Africa, which has hit record highs, according to a new study by Ipsos. And the stats are staggering. These unsmuggled foreign brands, over 90% of these tax dodging cigarettes, are actually produced right here in South Africa by 14 local manufacturers. They're being sold at around 5 rand a pack, a price so low it's economically impossible without dodging tax. In fact, the minimum collectible tax on a single pack of cigarettes, according to Ipsos, is 26 rand and 22 cents. That means the state loses over 28 billion rands a year, money that should be going to healthcare, should be going to education, infrastructure, and social services. But despite this massive hole in the public purse, law enforcement efforts, well, they seem to be failing. And the same names keep popping up. The market is flooded with cheap cigarettes, while companies like BAT are downsizing. To help us unpack this crisis and ask why SARS, why the South African police services and our intelligence agencies still can't seem to get a grip on the illicit sale of cigarettes, I'll be joined by Peter Ucko. He's the CEO of the Tobacco, Alcohol and Gambling Advisory. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate you giving us your time, and good morning.
My pleasure. Good morning. I hope that you are keeping warm. I'm trying.
Well, I'm sure where you are, it's a bit warmer than it is here in South Africa. But Peter, I want to jump right into this very, very concerning state of affairs. South Africa is reportedly losing 100 million rands a day to illicit cigarette sales. Is this the worst it has ever been? How did we get to this point? And your reaction to the state of affairs?
Well, there's a lot of answers to that fairly complex question. First of all, let's remember one thing. The formal tobacco manufacturers, the formal cigarette manufacturers with the known brands, are in the business to make money. The fact that they kill people with their products doesn't matter to them. They need to make a profit to pay dividends to shareholders. That's their sole aim. Now, why the timing of this report now about cigarette aid, illicit trade at this point? And it's simply because the process of the new legislation is going through Parliament. And that's to influence you and me and the public and the parliamentarians, particularly the parliamentarians, that this illicit trade, the tobacco industry, is harming South Africa. So they want to delay the legal process. They want to dilute the legal process. And that's always been their objective. Delay, dilute if they can, and it's obvious. So now let's look at the reality of the illicit trade. Cigarettes are cigarettes. They have to be manufactured somewhere. And where's that done? As you said, in South Africa. By whom? Well, my guess is mostly by the formal cigarette companies who are saying that they're using and your signals are. And so let's look at in about August 2019, when we were at the peak of the COVID ban, a tobacco manufacturer in South Africa exported cigarettes to Namibia in August 2019 that Namibia could have taken 3 years to consume, because we know more or less what the consumption is in Namibia. But they exported to Namibia 3 years worth of supply. So what was happening there? The truth is that those cigarettes never left the country. They stayed in South Africa. They were supplied to the illicit trade, round tripping, they call it, so that there's no VAT or anything. That's the first thing they save. And the second thing is that they then supply the illicit trade, and the illicit trade sells criminals, and they're always criminals. Doesn't matter what you do with VAT, doesn't matter what you do with excise and tax. It doesn't matter what you do. There'll always be illegal trade in a multitude of problems and products. We're just talking about one here, and that's cigarettes and tobacco. Those people sell, the criminals, the illicit trade, sell it to the consumer, and the consumers are happy to buy and to pay less. The fact that they're cheating their own government, committing a crime, that's a separate issue to discuss at another time. But the legal, licensed, as it were, manufacturers of known brands round trip the cigarettes and they end up in this illicit market. They get sold for much less, which means that smokers are likely to smoke more because the product costs less. Non-smokers might even start smoking because they didn't start previously, not only for health reasons, but they didn't start because of cost reasons. Now you remove the cost reason and say, oh, okay, I'll smoke. And worse than that is that young people, children, who can't afford the cigarettes now maybe can and start smoking. And then they are smokers because they become addicted and locked into this addiction of smoking tobacco products and addicted to nicotine for the rest of their lives. If they die or die prematurely, or a few of them do, they're making. Okay, I see I'm back.
Peter, we just lost you for a moment there, but I think we got the gist of the point that you're trying to make. One thing that was interesting for me is to find out that almost 90% of these illicit cigarettes are manufactured right here in South Africa. I think previously we always thought they're manufactured from our neighboring countries. They're brought through South Africa, through our borders, especially in the northern parts in Zimbabwe. That's where the bulk of the illicit cigarettes are made, produced, and ultimately find their way to our country. The change in this modus operandi, when you find that now South Africa is the major producer of these illicit cigarettes, does it stem from the systematic failures of our law enforcement agencies? Have they gotten worse over the years that there is no need to even do cross-border transactions? You can just do it right at home and you won't be found.
Yes. Well, there is, of course, there will always be some smuggling. Again, this is a matter of crime and criminals want to make money. So there'll always be some smuggling. But yes, you're right. Most of the illegal cigarettes, and they're not contraband. We're not talking about fake products where some guy sets up a cigarette manufacturing and calls it by its known recognized brand in South Africa. These are the formal, as I said before, the formal manufacturers, it would appear, and it happens around the world, are supplying the illicit market. So they don't lose any sales. They make money because they're selling cigarettes. They round trip them, as I said earlier, maybe to Namibia or to other parts of the country, and there are people involved. This has been internationally shown to be true. And the formal manufacturers supply the illicit trade. So they're not contraband or counterfeit. They're just illegally in South Africa, non-taxed. So 26 odd rand of the price of retail selling prices taken away. And cigarettes do not cost a lot to manufacture a pack of 20. I haven't looked at the latest price, but a few years ago, it cost about 1 Rand 20 or 1 Rand 50 to manufacture 20 cigarettes. So that there's lots of meat in the system to make money on illegal cigarettes supplied by legal manufacturers.
Very concerning. I want to focus on the point of enforcement failure here. Would you say this corruption and the failures to clamp it down from organizations like SARS, the intelligence and the police, is it a case of corruption? Is it capacity issues, or perhaps a lack of political will? And I think the worst case scenario combination of all three.
Yeah, again, it's a very complicated question. So let's first of all look at corruption. We know there's corruption. It doesn't matter what the product is or where it is. There is corruption, and in South Africa, it's particularly bad. We know that. The other thing is law enforcement. Well, sometimes that includes corruption. Sometimes they don't have sufficient capacity, but there's things we can do about that, and that's through the minister and the various departments. But the other thing is, as I said, right now there's a parliamentary process of the parliamentarians and the committees listening to inputs regarding the tobacco bill that was published in first in 2022 or 2019 first. Now the latest version is 2022, and that's the one that the tobacco industry is, I think, trying to delay by the publishing of this report. But now here's another thing that we and the government and SARS and everyone can do, and that is what they call tracking and tracing. It's part of the World Health Organization's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. There should be tracking and tracing. We haven't implemented any system for years and years and years. Now, the tobacco industry has their own system, and they want us to use their system because then they would know how to bypass it. So we need to introduce tracking and tracing. So if you find illegal cigarettes or illicit cigarettes in the community, let's say you go to some shop and you buy a product, well, you can track where that product was manufactured and when by that system. So hugely, the politicians need to introduce tracking and tracing as quickly as possible. The Department of Health particularly must drive the process, but the subcommittees, the government, the parliamentary committees and others, we must introduce tracking and tracing. I don't think that'll entirely eliminate the illicit trade and contraband and so on, but it'll put a stop to very much of it. And then all this tax that we supposedly losing and are losing because these are round trip products by formal manufacturers, we'll get that back. Tracking and tracing is vital.
Hmm. Very, very important. Lastly, before I let you go, Peter, if this trend continues unchecked, what happens next? Do we just lose the tobacco tax base entirely, and the market just becomes a dark, murky one completely? And how our consumers of cigarettes and tobacco products can be affected by this turn of events?
Yeah, it's a dark and gloomy future if the government doesn't act. The government must act. Our members of parliament and our members of the cabinet and the president must act, and they must act quickly to stop as much of the illegal trade and illicit trade as we can. How does it affect the consumers? As I said earlier in this discussion, the consumers are now buying a cheaper product. No, they're very happy. They'll smoke more because doesn't cost them much more because they're buying such cheap products. More smokers might decide not to quit because, you know what, I can afford the cigarettes now. And the worst of all is that the youth are more likely to start smoking and then become addicted and prisoners to this in slavery by the tobacco company that sells an addictive killer product. That's what they sell. And consumers will lose. So we must do everything that we can, because bottom line is we're going to save lives. And it's one of the objectives of TAG, save lives,
Mm,
save
mm,
individual lives, save communities, save society. It's just save families. It's a big project,
mm.
but yes, we have to do something. But there'll unfortunately always be illegal trade because criminals are criminals are criminals. They're the bad guys. I don't like them. And I say that with
No,
a smile on my face. But if I had a machine gun in my hand, a lot of criminals in front of me, who knows what I might do? I don't like the bad
no,
guys.
no, definitely. I don't think any of us do. Peter, always a pleasure chatting to you. And I hope we chat again in the not so distant future. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Whenever you're ready and whenever we can help the public and the community to live happier and healthier, more fulfilled lives for longer, I'm delighted to be able to do that. Thank you so much for inviting me.
They have it, CEO of Tobacco, Alcohol, and Gambling Advisory, Peter Ucko, and yeah, giving us insight on that latest study done by Ipsos, where over 90% of some of these cigarettes that you see at your local store, 90% of them are illicit. Hey, illicit. They are illegal. Are you seeing more cheap cigarettes being sold in your area, the shops? And do you think the government is doing enough to stop it? Do you want the government to do something to stop it? As someone who smokes, are you worried about whether or not the cigarettes that you're smoking come from the right manufacturers, have gone through the correct checks and balances? Do you care about that? Or for you, it's just about getting it as cheap as possible? You can let us know on WhatsApp 0617660355. Tell us, have you seen these 5 rand a pack smokes on shelves? And should buyers also carry, the responsibility themselves? Do you care to ask, why is it so cheap? Why does the box look a certain way? Is this taxed? Or you don't care? As long as it's cheap and you can get it, that's what matters. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, news and views continues after this.